pressure doesn't break you, it reveals you. When life tightens the grip, most people collapse emotionally. They react. They panic. They lose control. This audiobook is about becoming unshakable. Not numb. Not cold. Grounded. Centered. Decisive. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your emotional training. Here's the truth. Your emotions are either your strongest foundation or your weakest fault line. You have a choice. Train your emotional core, or let pressure decide who you become. This book shows you how to stay solid when everything around you is designed to break you. That's the key. Chapter 1. Stop letting pressure decide who you are. Pressure is not the enemy. Untrained emotion is. Most people get this backward. They blame the situation. They blame the stress. They blame the moment. But the moment is neutral. Pressure doesn't create weakness. It reveals it. That's the key. When pressure shows up, it doesn't force you to react. It exposes what you've been practicing all along. If you panic, you've practiced panic. If you freeze, you've practiced avoidance. If you explode, you've practiced emotional impulse. You have a choice, and that choice exists in every single moment of stress. Most people don't like hearing that, because if pressure isn't the enemy, then responsibility comes back to them. And responsibility is uncomfortable. So instead, they outsource their behavior to circumstances. I was stressed. I was tired. They pushed me. It just happened. No, it didn't just happen. You handed over control. That's weakness disguised as normal. Pressure tests the structure, not the situation. Read that again. Pressure tests the structure, not the situation. The situation is never the deciding factor. Your internal structure is. Your emotional core. Your habits under stress. Your conditioning when things don't go your way. Two people can face the same pressure. One stays grounded. One collapses. Same pressure. Different structure. That's not personality. That's training. And most people never train. They wait for calm to behave well. They wait for perfect conditions to be composed. They wait for comfort to show discipline. That's backwards. That's how fragile people think. Strong people understand something different. They understand that pressure is inevitable. So instead of avoiding it, they prepare for it. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training. That's the rule. If your emotional training is weak, pressure will decide who you are. If your training is solid, pressure becomes irrelevant. You have a choice. But here's where most people fail. They think the choice happens after pressure hits. It doesn't. The choice happens long before. It happens in how you live, how you think, how you respond to small stress when it doesn't matter. Because small reactions build big habits. Every time you snap in traffic, every time you complain under pressure, every time you rush, panic, or emotionally leak, you are training yourself. You're teaching your nervous system, this is how we respond. And later, when real pressure shows up, your body doesn't ask for permission. It defaults. That's why saying, I'll do better next time is meaningless. There is no next time without training. There is only repetition. It's not about intention. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's be clear. Emotional control does not mean suppressing emotion. Suppression is weakness in disguise. Suppression cracks under pressure. Control is different. Control means you feel the emotion, and you don't let it drive the wheel. Anger can exist without action. Fear can exist without collapse. Stress can exist without chaos. But only if you train. Most people don't. They let emotion decide for them. They let the environment dictate their inner state. Whoever controls your emotions controls you. And right now, for most people, pressure is in charge. Deadlines control them. People's opinions control them. Unexpected problems control them. That's not life. That's emotional slavery. You don't need their permission to be calm. You don't need perfect conditions to be steady. You don't need silence to be grounded. You need structure. Pressure tests the structure, not the situation. So let's talk about structure. Your emotional structure is built from three things: awareness, pause, and standard. First, awareness. You cannot control what you refuse to observe. If you don't notice when pressure starts rising, you've already lost. Most people live inside their reactions instead of watching them. Your first job is simple. Notice the moment pressure appears, not after. At the beginning, tight chest, short breath, faster thoughts. That's the signal. That's where the choice lives. Second, the pause. This is where power is created. The pause is the space between stimulus and response. And most people have none. They live in instant reaction. That's why they feel out of control. You must train the pause. 1 breath, 1 second. That's enough. You don't need to solve the problem. You need to interrupt the reaction. That's the key. Third, the standard. What do you do by default under pressure? That's your standard. And if you don't consciously choose one, your emotions will choose for you. Your standard might be, I slow down, or I stay quiet, or I don't decide while emotional. Pick one, then enforce it. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. You have a choice, always. But here's the truth most people avoid. Pressure is designed to steal your choice, compresses time, creates urgency. It screams, act now. That's why emotional discipline matters. Because discipline buys you time, and time restores choice. Reactive people feel rushed. Grounded people create space, and space is where control lives. Pressure tests the structure, not the situation. So stop asking, why is this happening to me? Start asking, what is this revealing about my training? That question changes everything. Because now pressure becomes useful. It becomes feedback. It shows you exactly where you're weak. And weakness, once identified, can be trained. That's how unshakable people are built. Not by avoiding stress, by using it. Every stressful moment is a rep. Every urge to react is a test. Every pause is a win. You don't need to fix your whole life today. You need to win this moment. Then the next. Then the next. That's discipline. And discipline compounds. Pressure will keep coming. That's guaranteed. But it doesn't get to decide who you are unless you let it. You have a choice. Pressure tests the structure, not the situation. Build the structure and pressure loses its power. You've stopped letting pressure define you. Now it's time to understand where real emotional strength actually comes from. Chapter 2. Emotional strength is built, not discovered. Most people are waiting for something they will never find. They are waiting to discover emotional strength. They think one day they'll wake up confident, calm, solid, unshakable, as if emotional control is a personality trait you either have or you don't. That belief keeps them weak, because emotional strength is not discovered. It is built. That's the key. You don't stumble into discipline. You don't accidentally become grounded. You don't magically stay calm under pressure. You train it, repeatedly, intentionally, relentlessly. You have a choice. You can wait for confidence to appear, or you can build emotional strength brick by brick. Most people wait. That's why most people crumble. They say things like, "I'm just not wired that way. I'm an emotional person. That's just how I react." No, that's how you've been trained. Every emotional reaction you've ever had has trained your nervous system. Every time you gave in to impulse, you reinforced it. Every time you avoided discomfort, you strengthened avoidance. You didn't choose emotional weakness. You practiced it, and what's practiced becomes automatic. That's uncomfortable to hear, but it's empowering. Because if emotional weakness can be practiced, emotional strength can be practiced too. That's the key. Look at anyone who performs well under pressure. Athletes, surgeons, first responders, high-level leaders. They are not calmer because life is easier for them. They're calmer because they've trained their response. They've felt pressure before, repeatedly, on purpose. Pressure is familiar to them, so it no longer controls them. Meanwhile, most people avoid pressure whenever possible. They seek comfort, ease, emotional relief, and then they're shocked when pressure overwhelms them. You don't train for battle by avoiding weight. You don't train calm by avoiding stress. That's not how strength works. It's not about talent. It's about conditioning. That's the key. Conditioning happens through exposure and repetition. Small exposures, controlled exposures, daily exposures, not breakdowns, not chaos. Training. Here's the mistake most people make. They wait for a big moment to prove their emotional strength. But strength is not proven in big moments. It's built in small ones. The small delay when you're irritated. The small pause when you feel rushed. The small decision to stay quiet instead of explaining. These moments look insignificant. They're not. They are reps. And reps build structure. You have a choice in every rep. Most people waste them. They say, "It's just a small thing," and they react. But small things build habits. And habits decide who you are when it's no longer small. That's why emotional strength is boring to build. It's repetitive. It's unglamorous. There's no applause for not reacting. But that's exactly why it works. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's be practical. If you want emotional strength, you must stop looking for emotional relief. Relief weakens you. Relief teaches your system that discomfort is dangerous. Discomfort is not dangerous. It's instructional. Every time you stay present in discomfort without reacting, you send a signal to your nervous system, "We can handle this." That signal accumulates. And over time, pressure loses its threat. Most people never reach that point because they numb themselves. Phones, noise, complaining, distraction, emotional dumping. Those are not coping strategies. They are escapes. Escapes delay growth. You don't need their permission to feel discomfort. You don't need comfort to stay composed. You don't need to feel good to act disciplined. You need standards. That's the key. Here's a simple standard you can adopt immediately. I do not trust emotional urgency. Emotions rush you. Discipline slows you down. Anytime you feel the urge to act now, speak now, decide now, pause. That urgency is rarely truth. It's usually emotion trying to regain control. Strong people don't rush emotional decisions. Weak people call urgency intuition. Learn the difference. Another standard. I train when it's easy, so I don't fail when it's hard. That means you practice emotional control when the stakes are low, when no one is watching, when it doesn't matter, because that's when discipline is cheapest. Waiting for high pressure to try emotional control is like learning to swim in a storm. That's not training. That's gambling. You have a choice. Train now or pay later. Let's talk about consistency. Emotional strength doesn't come from one good day. It comes from hundreds of ordinary days where you chose discipline over impulse. You will fail sometimes. That's normal. Failure doesn't erase training. Quitting does. Every time you notice a reaction after the fact, don't spiral. Learn. Adjust. Repeat. It's not about being flawless. It's about being relentless. That's the key. And here's the shift that changes everything. Stop asking, how do I feel? And start asking, what does this moment require? Feelings are internal weather. Requirements are external reality. Strong people prioritize requirements. Sometimes the requirement is silence. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's action without emotion. Emotion is allowed. It's just not in charge. That's emotional strength. And it's built, not found. You won't wake up one day suddenly unshakable. You'll wake up one day and realize pressure doesn't move you like it used to. That's when you'll know the training worked. Pressure tests the structure. And now the structure is stronger. You've learned that emotional strength is not a gift. It's a discipline. Now it's time to address the biggest leak in that discipline. The habit that destroys emotional control faster than anything else. You're ready for the next truth. Chapter 3. Reactivity is the fastest way to lose power. Reactivity feels natural. It feels justified. It feels human. And it destroys your power faster than anything else. That's the truth. The moment you react emotionally, you give up control. Not later. Immediately. You hand the steering wheel to the situation, the person, the comment, the pressure. That's the key. Reactive people don't realize they're being controlled because the emotion feels internal. Feels like you, but it isn't. It's a reflex you never trained out of yourself. You have a choice. You can react, or you can respond. One gives away power. The other concentrates it. Most people live in reaction mode. They speak when triggered. They decide when emotional. They move when rushed. And then they wonder why life feels chaotic. Chaos is the natural result of reactivity. Pressure pushes. Emotion flares. Action follows. No pause. No filter. No authority. That pattern repeats until it becomes identity. And here's the brutal truth. If someone can trigger you, they can control you. That's not philosophy. That's leverage. A comment controls you. A delay controls you. A look controls you. If your emotions move on command, so do you. That's the key. Reactive people leak power in three main ways. First, they talk too fast. Second, they decide too soon. Third, they explain too much. All three come from the same place: emotional urgency. Urgency is the enemy of control. Emotions create urgency to regain dominance. They push you to act now so you don't have time to choose differently. That's why reactivity feels automatic. Because it is. But automatic does not mean unavoidable. You have a choice. Let's talk about talking. When you react verbally, you lose authority. Words spoken under emotion carry instability. Even if your point is valid, your delivery weakens it. Reactive speech is loud, rushed, defensive, or sharp. Controlled speech is calm, slow, and deliberate. Which one commands respect? Silence used correctly is not weakness. It is restraint, and restraint signals strength. You don't need their permission to stay silent. You don't need to answer immediately. You don't need to explain yourself. That's the key. Most people speak to release pressure. Strong people hold silence to build leverage. Now decisions. Reactive decisions are emotional bets. They are made to escape discomfort, not to achieve outcomes. Quitting because you're frustrated. Agreeing because you're uncomfortable. Escalating because you feel challenged. None of those are strategic. They are emotional exits. Controlled decisions are delayed. They are made after the emotion settles, not during the spike. Strong people understand a simple rule. Never decide while emotionally elevated. Not angry, not excited, not afraid. Emotion distorts judgment in every direction. Delay restores clarity. You have a choice. Finally, explaining. Over-explaining is one of the most common signs of emotional weakness. It comes from the need to be understood, validated, or approved. Reactive people explain to relieve anxiety. Grounded people state and stand. The more you explain under pressure, the more you reveal insecurity. Authority doesn't require justification. That's the key. Now here's what most people misunderstand. They think not reacting means suppressing emotion. That's wrong. Suppression stores emotion, and stored emotion explodes later. Control is different. Control means the emotion is felt, observed, and restrained. You acknowledge it internally. You regulate it physically. You delay expression until choice returns. That's discipline. Let's get practical. When you feel triggered, your body reacts first. Heart rate rises. Breathing shortens. Muscles tighten. Thoughts speed up. That's your signal. Most people ignore the signal and obey the impulse. You won't. Your rule is simple. Pause before action. 1 breath. 2 seconds. That's enough. The pause breaks the chain. Stimulus. Pause. Choice. Without the pause, there is no choice. That's the key. Train the pause everywhere. In traffic. In conversation. In emails. In delays. In disagreements. Especially when it feels unnecessary. Because that's when training is cheapest. Reactivity thrives on habit. And habits are built in low-stakes moments. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you weaken the reflex. Every time you react, you strengthen it. It's not about the moment. It's about the pattern. You have a choice. Now let's address the lie people tell themselves. If I don't react, people will walk over me. False. Uncontrolled reaction makes you predictable. Predictable people are easy to manipulate. Calm people are unpredictable. And unpredictability commands respect. When others can't read your next move, they lose leverage. That's power. Reactivity feels strong, but it's fragile. Control feels quiet, but it's durable. That's the difference. Pressure tests the structure, and reactivity reveals cracks. Your goal is not to eliminate emotion. Your goal is to remove emotion from the driver's seat. Emotion can sit in the car. It just doesn't touch the wheel. That's discipline. Here's another standard you must adopt. I do not reward provocation. Provocation is bait. Emotional bait. The moment you react, you take it. Strong people leave bait untouched. Not because they're passive. Because they're strategic. You don't need to win every exchange. You need to maintain control over yourself. That's the real win. And here's the final truth of this chapter. Reactivity shrinks your world. Control expands it. When you're reactive, everything feels personal. Every obstacle feels heavy. Every comment feels loaded. When you're controlled, you see clearly. You act deliberately. You conserve energy. Energy saved becomes focus. Focus becomes execution. Execution builds dominance. That's the chain. You've learned that reactivity is not honesty. It's not authenticity. It's a lack of training. And training can be fixed. You have a choice. The next time you feel the urge to react, don't fight the emotion. Don't judge it. Just pause. Let it pass. Then act. That pause is where your power lives. You've stopped letting pressure decide who you are. You've learned that strength is built. Now you've identified the fastest way to lose power and how to stop it. Next, we go deeper. Because even controlled people can collapse if their foundation is weak. It's time to build something that doesn't break. Chapter 4. Build a core that doesn't collapse. Most people look stable until they're not. They function. They perform. They hold it together. Right up until pressure crosses a certain line. Then everything collapses. That's because what they built was not a core. It was a surface. That's the key. A surface holds under light pressure. A core holds under any pressure. And pressure will always find the difference. You don't build an unshakable life by managing appearances. You build it by strengthening what remains when appearances no longer matter. Your emotional core is what's left when comfort disappears. And for most people, there isn't much there. You have a choice. You can keep reinforcing the surface. Or you can build a core that doesn't collapse. Let's define the core. Your emotional core is not your mood. It's not your personality. It's not how you feel on a good day. Your core is your default behavior under stress. When things go wrong, what do you do automatically? Do you rush? Do you complain? Do you shut down? Do you lash out? That's your core. And the reason most people avoid this truth is simple. It exposes them. Pressure tests the structure, not the situation. If your core collapses, it means it was never strong to begin with. That's uncomfortable, but it's also useful, because what's exposed can be trained. That's the key. Most people build their lives around comfort. Comfort becomes the foundation, and comfort is a weak foundation. Comfort teaches you to expect ease. Ease teaches you to avoid resistance. Avoidance erodes resilience. Then, when pressure arrives, as it always does, the structure fails. Not because pressure is extreme, but because the core was never tested. Strong people reverse this. They build their core on discipline. They expect resistance. They normalize discomfort, not because they enjoy it, because they understand it. It's not about toughness. It's about preparation. That's the key. Let's get specific. A strong emotional core is built from 3 pillars: routine, restraint, and recovery. First, routine. Routine creates predictability when life is unpredictable. It anchors you when external variables shift. Most people skip routines because they feel restrictive. But restriction is stability. When pressure hits, you fall back on what you've rehearsed. If you have no routine, you improvise. And improvisation under pressure leads to emotional leakage. A simple routine, sleep, movement, reflection builds internal order. Order stabilizes emotion. That's discipline. Second, restraint. Restraint is the ability to not do what you feel like doing. Not speak. Not react. Not escape. Restraint strengthens the core faster than any motivational speech. Every restrained impulse reinforces the message, I am in control, and control compounds. You don't need their permission to hold back. You don't need to express everything you feel. You don't need immediate relief. That's the key. Third, recovery. A strong core is not rigid. It's resilient. It absorbs pressure and returns to baseline. Most people either collapse or stay tense. Both are signs of weakness. Recovery means you can experience stress and still return to calm. That requires intentional decompression. Silence, stillness, reflection, not distraction. Scrolling is not recovery. Complaining is not recovery. Numbing is not recovery. Recovery restores your center. Without it, stress accumulates and cracks form. That's the truth. Now let's address the mistake people make. They try to think their way into a strong core. They read. They listen. They analyze. But they don't behave differently. You don't build a core with insight. You build it with repetition. It's not about understanding. It's about enforcement. That's the key. Your emotional core grows when you hold your standard even when no one sees. Especially then. When you're alone and irritated. When you're tired and tempted. When you're frustrated and anonymous. Those moments shape you. Public discipline is easy. Private discipline builds the core. You have a choice. Let's talk about standards again. A collapsing core is usually the result of vague standards. I'll try to stay calm. I'll do my best. I'll see how I feel. Those are not standards. Those are excuses waiting to happen. A standard is specific and non-negotiable. I pause before speaking. I don't decide while emotional. I maintain my routine regardless of mood. Mood is irrelevant. Standard is everything. That's the key. Pressure doesn't break strong cores. It strengthens them. Because every test becomes confirmation. Every time you stay grounded under stress, your confidence increases, not emotionally, structurally. You trust yourself. And self-trust is unshakable. Most people seek reassurance from others because they don't trust their own core. They know it collapses, so they look outward. Strong people don't need constant reassurance. Their stability is internal. That's power. And here's the truth you need to hear. If your life feels emotionally fragile, it's not because you're broken. It's because your core hasn't been trained yet. And training starts now. You don't need a dramatic overhaul. You need consistent reinforcement. One routine. One restraint. One recovery practice. Repeated daily. That's discipline. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. That's the key. Pressure will continue to rise as your life expands. Responsibility does that. Ambition does that. So either you build a core that can handle it, or you stay limited to what you can emotionally manage. You have a choice. Build shallow comfort, or build deep stability. Only one holds. You've learned how reactivity drains power. You've learned how emotional strength is built. Now you've laid the foundation for something solid. But strength without clarity can turn rigid. Stability without distance can turn emotional. Next, you must learn how to detach without becoming cold. That's the balance. Chapter 5. Detach without becoming cold. Most people misunderstand detachment. They think detachment means shutting down. They think it means not caring. They think it means becoming distant, rigid, or cold. That misunderstanding keeps them emotionally exposed. Because real detachment is not apathy. It's clarity. That's the key. Coldness is avoidance. Detachment is control. Cold people numb themselves because they can't handle emotion. Detached people feel emotion and refuse to let it distort judgment. There's a difference, and it matters. You have a choice. You can drown in emotion, you can suppress it, or you can step back from it. Only one option gives you power. Most people stay too close to their emotions. They identify with them. They say, I am angry. I am anxious. I am hurt. No, you are experiencing anger. You are noticing anxiety. You are feeling discomfort. Language matters because identity creates attachment. When you fuse with emotion, it controls you. When you observe it, you regain authority. That's the key. Detachment starts with a simple shift. You are not your emotions. Emotions are signals, information, temporary states. They are not commands. Strong people treat emotions like data. Weak people treat emotions like orders. You have a choice. Now let's be clear. Detachment does not mean you stop caring about outcomes. It means you stop letting emotions dictate behavior. You can care deeply and still remain composed. You can be invested and still stay calm. You can feel pressure and still act deliberately. That's emotional maturity. Most people confuse emotional intensity with authenticity. They think reacting strongly makes them real. It doesn't. It makes them predictable. That's the key. When you detach, you create distance between stimulus and self. That distance does three things immediately. First, it slows time. Second, it restores perspective. Third, it removes urgency. Urgency is what emotion uses to hijack behavior. Detach and urgency fades. Let's talk about distance. Distance is not physical. It's psychological. It's the ability to say internally, I see this emotion. I acknowledge it. I'm not acting on it yet. That pause creates leverage. Without distance, emotion collapses your field of view. Everything feels personal. Everything feels immediate. Everything feels heavy. With distance, you see options. That's power. You don't need their permission to create distance. You don't need to explain why you're calm. You don't need to justify restraint. That's the key. Now here's the danger point. Some people hear this and swing too far. They become emotionally unavailable, closed, rigid, isolated. That's not detachment. That's armor. Armor protects, but it also disconnects. A strong emotional core doesn't hide. It regulates. Cold people withdraw because they're overwhelmed. Detached people stay present because they're grounded. That's the difference. Detachment keeps you engaged without being consumed. Now let's get practical. Here's a tool you must start using immediately. Label, don't narrate. Most people narrate their emotions. They tell stories. He disrespected me. This always happens. I can't believe this. Stories inflame emotion. Labels calm it. Instead say, anger is present. Frustration is rising. Tension detected. That small shift pulls you out of the emotion and into observation. Observation restores control. That's the key. Another rule: never act at the peak. Emotions have a curve. They rise. They peak. They fall. Most damage is done at the peak. Detached people wait for the descent. Waiting is not weakness. It's strategy. You don't need to win the moment. You need to protect your position. That's discipline. Now let's talk about people. People are the biggest emotional triggers. Opinions, reactions, disapproval, praise. Most people give others emotional authority over them without realizing it. A look changes their mood. A comment shifts their confidence. Silence creates anxiety. That's dependency. Detachment breaks dependency. It doesn't mean you stop listening. It means you stop reacting. Feedback becomes information, not identity. Praise becomes noise, not fuel. Criticism becomes data, not threat. That's emotional independence. That's the key. You have a choice every time someone reacts to you. You can internalize it, or you can observe it. Internalizing hands over control. Observation keeps it. Now let's address the hardest part. Detachment requires tolerating discomfort. When you don't react, emotion has nowhere to go. It lingers, pressures you. That pressure is temporary. Most people react just to make it stop. Detached people endure it. Not forever. Just long enough for clarity to return. That's training. And like all training, it's uncomfortable at first. Your mind will say something. Fix this. Do something. You don't obey. You wait. That's the rep. Every rep strengthens your emotional core. It's not about being passive. It's about being precise. That's the key. Here's another standard you must adopt. I don't personalize external chaos. Other people's emotions are not your responsibility. Their reactions reflect their training, not your worth. Detached people understand this. They stop carrying emotional weight that isn't theirs. That alone frees enormous energy. Energy saved becomes focus. Focus becomes execution. And execution is where results come from. Now listen carefully. Detachment is not something you turn on in big moments. It's a daily practice. You practice it in small annoyances, in delays, in misunderstandings, in silence, because that's where habits are built. You have a choice. Stay emotionally entangled, or step back and see clearly. One drains you, the other sharpens you. You're learning how to stay grounded without hardening, calm without withdrawal, control without suppression. That balance is rare, and that's why it's powerful. You've learned how to build a core that doesn't collapse. Now you've learned how to step back without disconnecting. But detachment alone is not enough. If you only practice it when things are calm, pressure will still break you. Next, you must learn how to train inside pressure itself. That's where real strength is forged. Chapter 6. Train under pressure or fail under pressure. There is no neutral ground with pressure. You either train under it, or you fail under it. That's the truth. Most people hope pressure won't come. They plan for best-case scenarios. They practice discipline when it's convenient. And then they're surprised when stress overwhelms them. Hope is not a strategy. Pressure doesn't ask if you're ready. It shows up when it wants. And when it does, it exposes your preparation. That's the key. If you only practice emotional control when life is calm, you are not practicing emotional control. You're practicing comfort. Comfort does not translate under pressure. You have a choice. You can deliberately train inside pressure, or you can wait and be tested without preparation. Only one path builds strength. Here's the principle you must accept. Stress is the weight. You don't build muscle by reading about lifting. You don't build endurance by watching runners. And you don't build emotional strength by avoiding stress. Stress is the resistance. Remove resistance and there is no growth. That's the key. Most people treat stress as a problem to eliminate. Strong people treat it as a tool to use. They don't seek chaos. They seek controlled exposure. There's a difference. Uncontrolled stress breaks people. Controlled stress builds them. Your job is not to drown in pressure. Your job is to step into it deliberately in small doses and stay disciplined while you're there. That's training. Let's talk about how people fail. They wait for pressure to force them to act. Then they try to stay calm. That's backwards. That's like trying to learn balance during an earthquake. You train before the earthquake. And training happens when it's uncomfortable but manageable. You have a choice. Here's the first rule of training under pressure. Start smaller than you think. Most people overestimate how much stress they can handle and underestimate how consistent they need to be. Training is not heroic. It's systematic. You don't need extreme situations. You need repeatable ones. Delays, discomfort, awkward silence, uncertainty. These are pressure environments. And most people escape them immediately. You won't. That's the key. When you feel pressure rising, your instinct will be to relieve it. Speak, move, distract, quit. Training means doing the opposite. Stay, breathe, hold your standard. Every second you remain composed under pressure is a rep. And reps build structure. You have a choice in every rep. Let's get practical. Here's a simple pressure training protocol you can use daily. First, delay your response. When you feel urgency, don't act immediately. Delay by 10 seconds, then 30, then a minute. Urgency weakens with time. Clarity strengthens with delay. You are training your nervous system to tolerate pressure without reacting. That's discipline. Second, maintain posture and breath. Your body teaches your mind how to feel. Under pressure, sit up. Slow your breathing. Relax your jaw. Drop your shoulders. This is not cosmetic. It's control. Calm physiology reduces emotional spikes. You're not pretending to be calm. You're practicing it. That's the key. Third, execute one small, deliberate action. Pressure creates overwhelm by making everything feel urgent at once. You counter that by choosing one controlled action. One email. One step. One decision delayed. Small, deliberate action restores agency. Agency restores confidence. That's training. Now let's address the lie that keeps people weak. I'll practice when things slow down. They won't. Life doesn't slow down. Responsibility increases. Pressure compounds. If you don't train now, you won't magically train later. You have a choice. Train when it's uncomfortable but safe, or be forced to perform when it's overwhelming and costly. That's the trade. Another mistake people make is emotional rehearsal. They imagine stressful situations and mentally panic. That's not preparation. That's negative conditioning. Your mind doesn't distinguish well between imagined stress and real stress. So if you repeatedly imagine failure, your nervous system practices failure. Stop doing that. Instead, rehearse discipline. Visualize the pause, the breath, the restraint. That's mental training. But it must be paired with real exposure. Insight without exposure does nothing. That's the key. Now understand this. Pressure training will feel bad at first. Your body will resist. Your mind will complain. It will say this is unnecessary, excessive, too hard. Ignore it. That voice is the same one that collapses later. Training rewires tolerance. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt urgent becomes normal. That's how strong people are made. Not because pressure disappears, but because it loses its authority. You don't need their permission to be uncomfortable. You don't need comfort to function. You don't need relief to continue. That's discipline. Let's talk about consistency again. One intense pressure session does not build strength. It builds fatigue. Strength comes from regular exposure with recovery. Train, recover, repeat. That cycle builds resilience without burnout. People who burn out don't train too hard. They train chaotically. Discipline is measured, structured, intentional. That's the key. Here's a standard you must adopt. I don't avoid pressure. I manage it. Avoidance teaches fear. Management builds mastery. You step in. You stay steady. You step out. Over time, your tolerance expands, and something powerful happens. Pressure stops feeling personal. It becomes procedural, just another condition to operate within. That's when you know you're changing. You're no longer hoping to stay calm. You're expecting to, because expectation is built on experience. And experience is built through training. You have a choice. Most people fail under pressure because they never trained under it. Not because they're weak, because they were unprepared. You won't make that mistake. You've learned to build a core. You've learned to detach. Now you're learning to perform while pressure is active. But training alone is not enough if your daily habits sabotage you. Pressure reveals more than reactions. It exposes routines. Next, you must understand why emotional control is not occasional, it's daily, and why discipline must be maintained even when nothing is wrong. That's where most people slip. Chapter 7. Emotional control is a daily discipline. Most people treat emotional control like an emergency tool. They reach for it when things go wrong. They try to stay calm when pressure spikes. They focus only when chaos hits. That's too late. Emotional control is not a response. It's a routine. That's the key. If you only practice discipline when something is wrong, you don't have discipline. You have damage control. And damage control is fragile. You have a choice. You can build emotional control into your daily life. Or you can keep scrambling when pressure shows up. Only one creates consistency. Strong emotional control is boring. It doesn't look heroic. It doesn't feel dramatic. It looks like standards enforced when nothing is happening. That's why most people skip it. They want intensity without consistency, results without routine, control without repetition. That never works. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. That's the key. Let's define daily discipline. Daily emotional discipline means you regulate yourself before regulation is needed. You don't wait to be triggered. You arrive prepared. That means your baseline is calm, not reactive. Most people live with an elevated baseline, always slightly rushed, slightly irritated, slightly tense. That constant low-grade stress drains capacity. Then when real pressure hits, there's nothing left. Daily discipline lowers the baseline, and a lower baseline gives you more room when pressure rises. That's control. You have a choice every morning. Do you wake up and immediately consume chaos? Messages, news, social input, noise? Or do you set your internal tone first? Strong people set the tone. They don't let the world do it for them. That's the key. Let's get practical. Here are non-negotiables for daily emotional discipline. First, structure your mornings. How you start the day determines your emotional posture. If your first action is reaction, your whole day follows. Check your phone immediately, and you train reactivity. Rush into tasks, and you train urgency. Instead, begin with something controlled. Silence, movement, breathing, reflection. Not for productivity, for regulation. You are telling your nervous system, we move deliberately. That message matters. Second, limit emotional input. You cannot be emotionally disciplined while flooding your system with stimulation. Endless opinions, endless outrage, endless comparison. That's not information. That's agitation. Strong people are selective with input because they protect their internal state. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to react to everything. You don't need to engage with everything. You have a choice. Third, practice restraint daily. Restraint is a muscle. Use it or lose it. Choose one small restraint every day. Don't interrupt. Don't check your phone. Don't complain. Don't rush. Small restraint builds big control, and it carries over when pressure increases. That's the key. Now let's address the trap people fall into. They think discipline means being rigid all the time. That's wrong. Discipline is flexible within standards. You can adjust your approach without abandoning your core. Strong people adapt. Weak people abandon. Daily discipline gives you options. Emotional chaos removes them. You have a choice. Another daily practice that matters. Emotional review. At the end of the day, ask yourself 2 questions. Where did I react? Where did I hold control? No judgment. No drama. Just data. Awareness sharpens discipline. If you never review, you repeat mistakes unconsciously. Strong people close the loop. That's the key. Now understand this. Daily discipline is not about perfection. You will slip. You will react. You will have off days. That does not mean you failed. Failure is abandoning the standard. Recovery is returning to it immediately. Strong people recover quickly. Weak people spiral. You have a choice. One emotional reaction does not define you. One uncorrected pattern does. Fix fast. Move on. That's discipline. Now let's talk about boredom. Discipline becomes boring once it works. No drama, no chaos, no emotional spikes. That boredom is stability. And most people sabotage stability because they mistake boredom for lack of progress. So they reintroduce chaos, stimulation, conflict. Then they wonder why they feel unsettled again. If your life feels calm, don't disrupt it. Strengthen it. That's the key. Emotional discipline is what allows you to show up the same way regardless of conditions. Good day or bad day. Praise or criticism. Pressure or ease. Consistency is power. And consistency is built daily. Not in emergencies. You don't need their permission to be steady. You don't need excitement to be disciplined. You don't need chaos to feel alive. That's the shift. You're no longer chasing control. You're maintaining it. And maintenance is what separates temporary improvement from permanent change. You've learned to train under pressure. Now you're learning to prevent collapse before it starts. But there is one habit that destroys daily discipline faster than anything else. A habit that looks harmless. A habit people defend. And it leaks power constantly. Next, we confront it directly. Chapter 8. Stop explaining. Start standing firm. Most people talk too much when they feel pressure. They explain. They justify. They defend. And every extra word leaks power. That's the key. Explaining feels responsible. Feels polite. Feels reasonable. But under pressure, over-explaining is not communication. It's insecurity in motion. You have a choice. You can explain to relieve anxiety, or you can stand firm and let silence do the work. Only one builds authority. Let's be clear. This is not about being rude. It's not about withholding information. It's about knowing when explanation is necessary and when it's emotional leakage. Most explanations under pressure are not for clarity. They are for comfort. You want to be understood. You want to be approved. You want the tension to disappear. That desire drives words. Strong people resist it. That's the key. Watch what happens when someone questions you. A reactive person fills the gap immediately. They talk faster. They add context. They justify decisions. They soften statements. A grounded person pauses. They respond briefly or not at all. And the room adjusts to them. Silence shifts pressure outward. You don't need their permission to pause. You don't need to answer immediately. You don't need to convince everyone. That's discipline. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you explain, the more you signal doubt. The more you justify, the more you invite challenge. Explanation invites debate. Clarity ends it. That's the key. Now let's talk about why this habit forms. Explaining is usually trained early. You learn to justify yourself to avoid consequences, to keep peace, to manage other people's emotions. That pattern carries into adulthood. But what protected you once now weakens you. Authority does not beg for acceptance. It stands. You have a choice. Let's talk about the difference between explanation and statement. Explanation tries to be accepted. A statement simply exists. I think this is the right direction because, versus, this is the direction. One asks for permission. The other assumes responsibility. You don't need their permission to stand firm. That's the key. This doesn't mean you never explain. It means you explain intentionally, not emotionally. You explain after decisions, not instead of them. You explain to inform, not to convince. Strong people decide first. Weak people talk first. Now let's get practical. Here's a standard you must adopt. One sentence before silence. When challenged, respond once. Clearly, calmly, then stop. No stacking, no rambling, no defending. If clarity is needed, it will be requested. If it's not requested, your silence is the answer. That silence communicates confidence. That's the key. Now let's address the fear underneath. Most people explain because they fear being misunderstood, rejected, judged. But here's the reality. People who want to misunderstand you will do so regardless of explanation. People who respect you don't require over-justification. So stop trying to control perception. Control yourself instead. You have a choice. Standing firm does not mean being aggressive. It means being stable. Your tone is neutral. Your words are measured. Your posture is calm. No emotional charge. That's power. Now let's talk about emotional dumping. Some explanations are not explanations at all. They're emotional unloading. You talk to feel better. You vent to release pressure. That may feel good momentarily, but it trains dependency. You're teaching yourself that relief comes from talking, not regulating. Strong people self-regulate first. Then they speak if needed. That's the key. Another critical rule. Don't explain your boundaries. Boundaries lose strength when over-explained. No is a complete sentence. So I'm not available is enough. The more you justify boundaries, the more you invite negotiation. And boundaries are not negotiations. You don't need their permission to protect your time. You don't need to justify your limits. That's discipline. Now let's talk about leadership. Whether you lead formally or not, people take cues from how you speak under pressure. Excessive explanation creates instability. It signals uncertainty. Concise communication creates trust. People feel safer around clarity. That's why calm, quiet people often command the room without trying. They don't fight for space. They occupy it. That's the key. But here's the part that matters most. Standing firm is an internal act before it's external. You must first stop explaining to yourself. Stop narrating. Stop justifying emotional reactions internally. Stop rationalizing weakness. Internal explanation weakens discipline. Replace it with standards. I don't react. I don't rush. I don't over-explain. Those are not affirmations. They are rules. Rules reduce friction. Friction drains energy. You have a choice. Let silence work for you instead of against you. Let others sit with uncertainty while you remain steady. That discomfort you feel when you don't explain, that's training. Endure it. Every time you don't fill the gap, your emotional authority grows. Pressure tests the structure. Silence reveals it. You've learned how daily discipline stabilizes you. Now you've removed one of the biggest leaks of power. But control is not just about what you don't do. It's also about what you become in shared spaces. Next, you must learn how to project calm, not through effort but through presence. Because calm is contagious, and leadership is quiet. Chapter 9. Become the calm in every room. Every room has an emotional temperature. Most people walk in and absorb it. Strong people walk in and set it. That's the difference. Calm is not something you announce. It's something others feel when you arrive. That's the key. If you are easily influenced by the mood of the room, you are not leading, you are reacting. Leadership, in its purest form, is emotional stability under observation. And observation is always happening. You have a choice. You can let the environment shape you, or you can become the anchor others unconsciously adjust to. Only one creates influence. Most people think influence comes from speaking more, asserting harder, or dominating space. It doesn't. It comes from not being moved. That's the key. When you remain calm while others are agitated, something subtle happens. People slow down, voices drop, reactions soften. Not because you demanded it, because nervous systems sync. Emotional states are contagious. Panic spreads. Calm spreads faster if it's real. Fake calm doesn't work. Cracks. Real calm comes from training. You have a choice. Let's break this down. To become the calm in every room, you must master 3 things: presence, pace, and restraint. First, presence. Presence means you are fully where you are, not mentally rehearsing, not scanning for approval, not preparing your next defense. Distracted people feel unstable. Present people feel solid. Presence is felt before it's understood. When you are present, you don't fidget emotionally or physically. You listen without urgency. You respond without rush. That steadiness sets the tone. That's the key. Second, pace. Reactive people move fast when pressure rises. Their words speed up. Their decisions rush. Their energy spikes. Calm people slow the room by slowing themselves. They speak slightly slower. They pause before responding. They don't mirror agitation. Pace is leadership. You don't need to hurry because others are nervous. You don't need to match chaos to be relevant. You have a choice. Third, restraint. Restraint is what stops you from amplifying noise. You don't comment on everything. You don't react to every signal. You don't fill every silence. The room learns quickly that emotional spikes don't move you. That teaches others to regulate themselves. That's influence. Now let's talk about what most people do wrong. They try to project calm instead of being calm. Projection is performance. Being calm is internal alignment. People sense the difference instantly. If you're tense inside but acting relaxed outside, others feel the tension. Calm must be embodied. That's the key. So how do you embody it? By trusting your internal structure. If your core is strong, you don't need to control the room. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to prove. You simply remain steady, and steadiness commands attention. You have a choice. Let's talk about emotional leadership in conflict. Conflict is where calm is tested publicly. When voices rise, most people either escalate or withdraw. Calm people do neither. They stay neutral in tone. They state facts without heat. They don't personalize attacks. This frustrates reactive people because there's nothing to grab. No hook. No leverage. That's power. Remember this rule. Never compete with chaos. Chaos always wins the volume contest. But volume is not authority. Silence and clarity outlast noise. That's the key. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Becoming the calm will sometimes make others uncomfortable. People who rely on emotional volatility lose influence around you. People who thrive on drama feel exposed. That's not your problem. You don't need their permission to be steady. You don't need to lower yourself to fit in. That's discipline. Some will respect you more. Some will distance themselves. Both are signs that your presence is changing the dynamic. Now let's talk about consistency again. You can't be calm only when it's convenient. One emotional outburst resets the perception. Consistency builds reputation. And reputation creates influence without effort. People begin to expect stability from you. And expectations shape behavior. That's leadership without words. You have a choice. Now let's address the internal work. To be calm externally, you must be calm internally. That means you don't emotionally rehearse interactions before they happen. Most people do. They imagine arguments. They replay conversations. They preload emotion. Then they walk into the room already charged. Stop doing that. Enter neutral. Observe first. Engage second. That order matters. That's the key. Another rule. Don't rush to be understood. Calm people are okay being misunderstood temporarily. They trust time and consistency. Reactive people demand instant understanding. One builds credibility. The other burns it. You don't need immediate validation. You need long-term respect. Now understand this. Becoming the calm does not mean becoming passive. It means becoming precise. When you speak, it carries weight because you don't speak often. When you act, it's deliberate because you're not rushed. That contrast is powerful. People listen when you speak. They notice when you move. That's influence. Pressure tests the structure. Presence reveals it. You've learned how to remove emotional leakage. You've learned how to stabilize rooms instead of reacting to them. But there is one final step. Calm must be maintained not occasionally but over a lifetime. And that requires a decision that must be renewed. Every day, every moment. Now we close the loop. Chapter 10. Unshakeable is a decision you renew daily. There is no finish line for emotional strength. No moment where you arrive. No day where discipline becomes automatic forever. Unshakable is not a trait you earn. It's a decision you renew. Daily. That's the key. Most people fail here. Not because they didn't learn. Not because they lacked insight. But because they assumed strength once built would take care of itself. It won't. Anything not maintained decays. You have a choice. You can recommit to discipline every day. Or you can drift back into reaction. Drift is subtle, quiet, comfortable, and dangerous. Strong people don't rely on how they feel. They rely on standards. That's the difference. Emotional control is not a mood. It's a rule set. Rules don't care how you feel. That's the key. Every day, pressure resets the test. Some days are easy. Some are heavy. Some hit without warning. But the question is always the same. Who decides your behavior today? Your emotions or your discipline? You have a choice. And that choice does not get locked in by yesterday's success. Yesterday's calm does not guarantee today's control. That's why renewal matters. Let's be clear. Renewal is not motivation. It's enforcement. You don't wake up and hope to be grounded. You wake up and decide how you operate. I pause before reacting. I don't decide while emotional. I don't explain under pressure. I don't outsource control. Those are not affirmations. They are contracts. And contracts must be honored daily. That's the key. Here's where most people slip. They mistake improvement for immunity. They get better, calmer, more stable. Then they loosen standards, skip routines, ignore small reactions, and slowly, quietly, the edge dulls. Then pressure hits again and they're surprised. Strong people are never surprised by pressure. They expect it, so they stay sharp. You have a choice. Stay disciplined even when things are going well. Or wait until pressure forces you to remember what you already knew. Now let's talk about identity. At some point, emotional discipline stops being something you do and becomes something you protect. You protect your calm. You protect your standards. You protect your internal order. Not aggressively, deliberately. You stop putting yourself in situations that constantly erode control. You stop entertaining emotional chaos out of habit. That's maturity. That's the key. Unshakable people don't prove themselves. They preserve themselves. They don't chase stimulation. They value stability. Because stability is not boring when you understand its power. Stability lets you think clearly. Clarity lets you act decisively. Decisiveness compounds results. That's the chain. Now understand this. You will still feel emotion. You will still feel pressure. You will still feel moments of doubt, frustration, and stress. Unshakable does not mean untouched. It means unmoved. Emotion can pass through without rearranging you. That's control. And control is a daily practice. You have a choice every time emotion rises. Do you obey it, or do you observe it? Observation keeps authority. Obedience gives it away. That's the key. Let's talk about recovery one last time. Even disciplined people get tired. Even grounded people get strained. The difference is how fast they return to center. They don't spiral. They don't narrate. They don't self-attack. They correct. Correction is a sign of strength. If you react, you don't quit. You reset. Immediately. No drama. No shame. No story. Back to the standard. That's discipline. Weak people make mistakes and collapse into them. Strong people make mistakes and step out of them. You have a choice. Now let's talk about time. Over time, your renewed decisions accumulate. Quietly, invisibly. People won't see the daily discipline. They'll see the result. They'll see that pressure doesn't rattle you. That chaos doesn't speed you up. That emotion doesn't hijack you. They'll call it confidence, presence, leadership. But you'll know the truth. It's training. That's the key. And here's the final shift you must make. Stop asking, how do I stay unshakable? Start asking, what standard am I enforcing today? Today, not someday. Unshakable is built in today's conversations, today's delays, today's frustrations, today's silence. You don't need a perfect life to be unshakable. You need consistent decisions. That's all. You don't need their permission to stay grounded. You don't need external calm to maintain internal order. You don't need approval to stand firm. You have a choice. Every morning, pressure will wait. Every day, emotion will test you. Every moment, the option will appear. React or respond. Rush or pause. Explain or stand. Those choices look small. They are not. They are everything. Pressure tests the structure. And now the structure is yours. You've learned how to stop letting pressure define you. You've learned that strength is built, not found. You've removed reactivity, built a core, learned detachment, trained under pressure, enforced daily discipline, stopped explaining and become the calm. Now comes the simplest and hardest part. Do it again tomorrow. Renew the decision. Because unshakable is not who you are once. It's who you choose to be every day. That's the work. And now it's yours. You've heard the truth. Life will not get easier. Pressure will not disappear. People will not stop testing you. So the question is simple. Will you stay grounded or stay reactive? Being unshakable is not about suppressing emotion. It's about commanding it. You don't need permission to be calm. You don't need approval to be steady. You don't need validation to stand firm. That's the key. Train your emotional core. Choose discipline over impulse. Choose grounding over chaos. The world rewards the person who doesn't break when it pushes. Now the challenge is yours. The next time pressure hits, don't react. Don't explain. Stand firm. Because unshakable isn't a trait. It's a choice you make. Again and again. And it starts now.